With me today are two experts in K-12 education. As a matter of fact, they're associated with PBK Architects, the largest design firm associated with K-12 in the United States. They are Dan Boggio, the founder and executive chair of PBK based in Texas. Dan, welcome.
Great to be here, Rob. Thank you.
And Melissa Turnbaugh, who is a partner and the National Education and Innovation Leader. Welcome, Melissa.
Thanks so much for having us.
Great. Well, we talked a couple of years ago when we were in the middle of this thing called a pandemic, and we're assuming that things have changed in the last 2.5 years or so. So we want to talk about new developments in K-12. And you guys are incredibly strong in the Texas and the Southwest, and you're doing what, almost $2 billion worth of construction, Dan, something like that on that order?
Yeah, actually, we're pushing a little over $3 billion a year.
Oh my God, $3 billion in construction value?
Yes.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So tell us, Dan, how the market looks for you guys. Obviously, it's looking pretty good. What's happening?
Well, let me just say the school market is alive and well in the United States. And I can tell you that since COVID, we've seen an increase in school construction across the nation. When we take the big states with the most students, if we go to places like Texas, where we're at, we've seen an unprecedented amount of bond referendums related to school construction. We could say the same thing for California. We could say the same things for Florida. So right now we've seen an expansion in school construction. And more than anything, we see that school buildings are becoming a lot more student-centered. We see school administrators and school board members preferring to look at ways that they can deinstitutionalize buildings. So we're seeing the buildings become a lot more sophisticated in terms of environments that relate to students, environments where students can walk in the door and feel some sense of engagement, and certainly not like the old days where we had, terrazzo floors and painted concrete block walls. Now we're seeing warm materials, and to a large extent, we're now seeing school boards and school administrators looking at research and adopting that as they move forward, adopting that mantra of deinstitutionalized buildings as we move forward and continue to build new schools and renovate existing schools.
Yeah. Melissa, what are you seeing in addition to what Dan has said in terms of this research and what school administrators and parents and even students are asking for these days?
Great question. I think coming out of the pandemic, people are hungry to adopt and adapt with the research. And I think we're open to new ways of learning. And so I think with that, one of the things we learned and we've really advocated for post-pandemic is getting kids outside. Mm-hmm. There is a litany of research about the, not only natural light, but just the fresh air. It's good for your physical health, emotional health, which I think is some of the things that struggled during the pandemic. And so if we can take that schoolyard as an opportunity for learning, for physical activity and getting kids outside, I think that's something that it has really changed our thought process. And students are more successful. And so advocating for that, I think we've done that so successfully in elementary schools, but middle school and high school students and teachers also need to get outside. And so I think that is something where we have partnered with great organizations, the Children in Nature Network, Nature Conservancy. They have a litany of research that they have brought forward, and it has really kind of changed how we design, but also how we're presenting it to school districts, and they're hungry for it. So I think that's one option.
So you're getting buy-in from school districts to on this advocacy for wellness factor in getting the kids outside as much as possible. Of course, Texas, Florida, California, that's a little bit different from from other climates, but I
Right.
mean, there's still
That's
long stretches of the year where kids can get outside, even in the north and then in the
That's
northwest. So yeah,
right.
yeah.
It manifests in very different ways based on your kind of geography,
Mhm,
but also being respectful to, district's maintenance and operations team. So
mhm,
making sure that we're not adding additional burden to them with, overly complicated outdoor environments, but just giving kids that opportunity. I
mhm.
think the things we've heard from administrators and districts coming out of the pandemic, Dan mentioned engagement, and just physical attendance. And part of that is their health and well-being, and helping decrease anxiety. Students are also, there's a lot of neurodiversities they're struggling with, whether it be dyslexia and autism. And so providing environments that can support that. We are doing an autistic playground right now in California that's
Wow.
really, it's good for every student, but for those kids with kind of sensory stimulation concerns, this is a playground that is tailored to them. So those are the kind of things these are things that students are adapting and working through. And so how the built environment can support that
Okay.
is really important.
Yeah. So engagement, getting outside, and so forth. Um, what about any new developments, innovations related to sustainability, things like air exchange? That became a big talking point. Dan, what are your the engineering firms and the engineers at PBK? What are you doing about that situation? Because
Well, again, we're so pleased that administrators and school board members are looking at research, because the research shows that if we can have favorable indoor air quality in our environments, that we get a lot of benefits. We get increased student attendance. When we get increased student attendance in most states, that actually means more dollars for the school districts, because
right.
they get their, so we get increased student attendance. With the increased student attendance, we get increased student performance. The performance comes from not only them missing school less, but it also comes from a standpoint that with quality air on the inside of a building, they're more alert during the day, and they're
Mhm.
feel more connected to the school. And that's certainly a big movement. And again, as we mentioned, we're so happy that the research is coming forward, and we're seeing the school community adopt this research. So that's a real big issue. That, and something that is always on everyone's mind, is how can we get the most amount of air quality for the least amount of dollars? So there's new mechanical systems that have come out. There's a system that we're using where it actually tunes up the building in real time, every microsecond, so we always know that we're getting the maximum amount of air treatment for the minimum amount of dollars. So that's a huge
Wow.
issue. There's one other big issue in the school business when
Please.
we get up at 30,000 feet and look down, and that is we're seeing a lot of projects where we're doing a lot more experiential learning. And by that, I mean, we're creating metaverse environments. We used to do graphics strictly on the wall to give a little bit of life to a room. Now we're doing graphics in schools that are encompassing environments. And you walk into a room, there's graphics on the ceiling, there's graphics on the wall, there's graphics on the floor, where you can actually feel like you're in another environment. And that's from a graphic standpoint. And as a result of research that shows how much more children learn and how they retain more knowledge when they learn visually and not just verbally, or not just by reading. We're also seeing a lot more monitors in schools, or a lot more digital learning, where we've got large screens. In fact, right now we're experimenting with a dome that actually allows us to get into a metaverse environment, and there's a 360-degree environment. We're looking at putting that in one of our new middle schools as we speak. And that same particular school district, we've done a tremendous amount of metaverse environments, the comprehensive graphics on all the surfaces.
Wow, that's great. That sounds like a real breakthrough. Unfortunately, we have had, in the interim since our last chat, a terrible situation in one of the school districts in Texas. And of course, we're talking about Uvalde.
Mhm.
And, it brings up the whole issue of the question of safety and security in schools. And what are you doing at PBK to address school safety through design? There is the whole CPTED concept. Melissa, you're shaking your head. Why don't you handle that one for me, please?
Sure. I think, safety, people need to feel physically safe to go to school. And this is school, teachers and students. But it's also part of that is also making sure it doesn't feel prison-like, right? What sometimes things that I just was in a discussion yesterday about the same topic of how do we find a balance by putting learning on display and having natural light and windows and all of these things that are research-based that are good for learning while also making it safe. And so what we're finding is things that we've been practicing, security vestibules, filming glass so that we can still have that transparency and natural light, but it's a lot more secure. We're leveraging technology a lot more, not only with, card readers and access control to limit, the areas that people have access to within a building so that you're buying time in a lot of cases. And just obviously how increased there have been and, video surveillance and cameras and things like that. But really, we're trying to find a balance where you have good line of sight. You have different safety kind of barricades and measures. You have places where students can retreat or go to feel safe, but that it's not hindering learning. Because what we don't want to do is make it very safe and very poor for their everyday purpose of it, which is to be there to build friendships, relationships, and learn. And so,
as you said, we don't want to turn schools into prisons.
That's right. And what that does
thing.
Psychologically, right? I think, these students are already so often struggling with a lot of things that they're coming into the school with. And if the environment isn't engaging, as Dan mentioned, and supportive, then we're just compounding the fear and compounding the anxiety. And so I think that's something that we've really, really looked at is how do we find that balance so that you do have safety protocols, you do have safe spaces within the building, but it's not at the detriment of your day-to-day educational.
Okay. All right, good. Thank you. All right. Something that I'm particularly interested in is CTE, career and technical education. Not every child is going to go to university. And what are we doing, particularly since we know that the jobs of the future are going to be involved in things like electrification and EVs and a million other high-tech industries that don't necessarily require a university education to be successful in. So what's happening in CTE in your practice at PBK, Dan? What's going on in that area?
You know what? We actually have a CTE expert in our office, and that happens to be Melissa. And
okay, well, then let's defer to Melissa.
She has done a number of the most amazing CTE facilities in this country. So I'm gonna let Melissa talk about that because she's the real expert.
Well, thanks. CTE is, even since I've been doing this for, the past decade of career and technical education facilities, they have evolved so rapidly. Building the environment.
What's new?
What's new? You mentioned it, manufacturing, automotive, the importance of automating and understanding that. We were just having discussions about the auto shops and how they need to be fit for EV. And what that means for high school students and the safety measures, right? These are batteries that can be very dangerous if you're not careful. And so how do we build in those safety measures? They're heavier vehicles. What does that mean? But I think that automation and technology is happening everywhere. We're seeing even in healthcare, and in some of these programs, they're using mannequins or boards that are all digital for learning and for teaching. They have simulation. Even in cosmetology, I have learned that they have simulation of putting on eyelashes or doing facial treatments before they actually work on people. So, I mean, the
I
importance
could have used that this morning. Yeah, it would have been very,
right?
very helpful.
Yeah. So it's fascinating within
Yeah.
these industries that, like cosmetology, that you might not have thought there's a huge opportunity with AI, with automation, with digital components. And again, manufacturing is one we see rapidly growing with understanding processes and how students can do that. With systems going to automation and some of the jobs changing so rapidly, making sure students have that skill set no matter what industry they're pursuing, I think is really important. And then designing facilities that are flexible. These facilities we're designing now are for careers that don't yet exist, right? These buildings will outlive some of these careers.
Yeah.
And so making sure that the spaces are flexible, they are obviously filled with a lot of power and technology so that they are adaptable. I mean, we had one project that from the time we finished construction documents to when the building opened, one of the programs had already changed. But
Wow.
because of the
So,
infrastructure,
so
it was
you mentioned cosmetology, healthcare, manufacturing, things like electric vehicles.
yes,
What are the other hot areas of CTE that you're seeing?
engineering, a lot of
Engineering,
engineering, a lot of welding. Welding is a
welding. Mhm.
program that is in every district, regardless of the demographic, or is welding is
Mhm.
rapidly growing, and there's a huge need for that.
Photovoltaic installation. I mean, is that too specialized, or is that?
I think it's a facet,
Yeah.
electrical is another one that's a facet of kind of what they're doing, is not
Mhm.
only understanding, running conduit. IT is another program,
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
cybersecurity and things like that, is
Mhm.
very prevalent. And then depending on the part of, the country that you're in, we've seen all different facets that are more maybe, centric to that area. If you're,
Okay.
next to the airport and
All
things
right.
like that.
One
Thanks for
other
that.
thing we're
Oh,
seeing too is robotics labs. And so, and that's related to the manufacturing Melissa talked about. And so, but that's been quite interesting. And we see that expanding in CTE right now.
okay. Two other areas that I am very interested in, and my audience is the arts in school. And arts get pushed back. It's there, a lot of districts, it gets cut or reduced. The orchestra director gets let go, and I hate that. And sports, I know, Texas and your markets, your major geographical markets, are nutcase, have nutcase stadiums and locker rooms, and I mean, some of these facilities are, make the average college team sports program look like second rate.
Sure.
What's going on? So in the arts and in sports and sports recreation, locker rooms, and all those kinds of things. Dan, you want to handle that?
Yeah, let me just mention something. And first of all, let me say, yeah, there's no lack of enthusiasm for sports in Texas. I can tell you that. But we see that all over the country. Again, I'm going to go to the research. And the research shows that certainly we need to do the basics in school, and we need to teach the kids the basics. But there's something that goes beyond that. When we can get these kids engaged in school, we can get them engaged in extracurricular activities. We know that we can have these kids can go down a road in school and become successful students, and ultimately become successful citizens once they leave school. And so, and we're seeing, just as a general movement, many things in the arts and in sports that help that. And while those things used to get kicked to the curb when budgets got strained, we're not seeing that anymore. The research won't allow us to kick that to the curb. The research says, yes, we do have to have robust sports program, because that is going to connect kids to the school, and it's going to make them better students. One of the big movements is there as a result of the increase in sports is all the natural turf fields are disappearing in this country. We're not doing that. Virtually everybody's either has changed their natural turf to artificial turf or is in the process of doing that. And that's a result of the more robust use of these fields, and the natural turf just won't take that.
And the safety and injury question as well.
Yeah, safety and injuries.
Maintenance, huge issue. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so we see these our school boards, our wise school boards and our school administrators putting more importance on this than they used to in the past. Now, if budgets are strained, we don't see these things getting kicked to the curb as quick. Yeah, and we see the same thing in the arts. Certainly the arts are some of the exciting things that are happening in the arts are some technology that's entering the arts, and where kids are actually doing they're doing fine art, but they're doing it digitally and then printing it. So and that's another place where we can really keep kids engaged when they're not drawn to the academic side of school. They can be drawn to the sports side, they can be drawn to the art side. And so we're excited to see that. We're excited to see those programs remaining intact.
Yeah, Melissa, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll just say, districts are wise and they're trying to be also good stewards with resources. And so a lot of things, this football stadium for Friday Night Lights takes on a lot more roles now, right? It's also for band competitions, it is for track and field, but they're starting to use some of these facilities that maybe historically were for a certain purpose, and they become year-round facilities.
Like what? Give me an example.
Okay, so there's new performing arts center. So historically that would have been used for theater, but now it's used for lectures. Now it's used for teacher events. Now it's used for community gatherings. So they're making smart decisions and being good stewards with the resources, and so that they don't sit vacant, but also so that they get more buy-in. It's not just for football. It's not just for performing arts, because now everyone has the opportunity to take advantage of these wonderful spaces. And that really helps them with their communities too, to advocate for spending the money, because some of these spaces are obviously very expensive.
Anytime you can spread that buy-in.
That's right.
It's, I'm not a big sports person, but if we could use that facility to have an arts fair in the middle of the stadium, that might be something I'm interested in, or whatever. Yeah,
that's right. That's what my kid does, but my kid might not play football, or
exactly.
And so then it really becomes, which is what schools are, is they're a community hub, and then they really have community support and buy-in, and then they're being better stewards because they're not sitting vacant as often, right? They're really holistic.
The dreaded Rob Cassidy question is coming up. Okay. And I'm going to have Melissa go first, because Dad's the boss and he gets to wrap it up. So, and that question always is, what one bit of advice do you have for the AEC professionals that are watching this? What in 30 seconds, what would you advise AEC professionals to be looking for, to be thinking about, to be implementing in their work based on your own experiences?
Oh, that's great. I think right now, and I mentioned it, teachers and students are struggling. And I think post-pandemic, a lot of things that are happening. And we're at the cusp of this, of really designing environments to be well for all of them. Thinking of the school, this is a workplace for teachers. And so to retain teachers, they need to feel that this is their professional place. And so providing environments for them to be successful. Similarly for students with, different struggles and neurodiversities, what does that mean for the built environment? And so really all of us kind of having a better grasp and understanding of what those things are that might help students. We just recently put some textures on walls for early childhood, because it helps kids not only follow the path, but calm them down for this kind of sensory stimulation. The more that we can collectively as a group know about those things using research, the more we will have an impact on those in the confines of what we do on those kids and on those students. So that would be my advice, is
okay.
And I'm taking it myself, but of what we really need to kind of focus on.
Okay, Dan, take us out with some of your genius, please.
Well, Rob, let me just tell you something. You hit an emotional chord with this, because this is very important to me, and that is I believe that the design community, and I'm talking about the entire design community, including our office, we need to do a better job of harvesting the research that's out there and then designing buildings accordingly. Let me give you an example. There have been studies going back to the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s showing what natural light does to student performance, but yet
Lisa Heshong, going back,
Exactly. And you want to know something? In the 70s and 80s, the design community in this country were designing windowless buildings.
Yeah.
And there's no need for that. The research was there. Well, I can tell you right now, in this environment that we're in, where school boards are ready to adopt research-based design, there is such great research out there on so many different things. It's the design community's responsibility to harvest this research and then design according to it. We can change the lives of students when we understand that there's research that shows how we can engage kids in these schools, and when they're engaged in these schools, they become successful students, and they move on to become successful students, and they take the right turn instead of the wrong turn, and they end up being having a better life. That's powerful, and the design community can have an effect on that if we would harvest the research. And I'll just take another half a minute and say there's an organization that has arisen. The name of the organization is LEARN. It's Learning Environments Action Research Network, and it includes Google Education. It includes some wonderful architects from around the country, and it includes a host of incredible school administrators. And the sole purpose of that organization is to harvest research from around the country that's related to facilities and pass that information on to school districts. And so if I had a moment with every design professional in this country, including all the people in our office, I would say, please, we have a huge responsibility to these kids. They're the future, and we need to harvest this research. We need to get it into our office, and we need to design buildings that we know are going to do the best thing for kids. And if we do that, if we would have done that in the 70s, if we would have done that in the 80s, we wouldn't have windowless buildings that we're stuck with today and we're renovating. We have one school district right now. We have a huge bond referendum component where we're just going into existing buildings and adding windows in windowless buildings because they now know it's so important. So to all my design colleagues, please look at the research and please design accordingly. So sorry about that. I feel so strongly about that.
It must have been that extra cup of coffee this morning.
Yeah.
Well, listen, we've had a really fun chat, but a really informative one, and I love the emphasis on research. And I thank both Melissa Turnbaugh, partner at National Education and Innovation Leader at PBK, and Dan Boggio, the founder and executive chairman of PBK Architects, for this very informative and really inspiring discussion. Thanks so much.
It's so great to talk to you, Rob. Thank you very much.
Take care.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.